On a quiet Thursday evening in Pittsburgh, Olivia Grant sat alone in her small apartment, staring at the promotion email glowing on her laptop screen. Senior Financial Analyst. A title she had worked years to earn. She expected to feel joy, maybe disbelief, maybe even tears, but she barely had 10 seconds to breathe before someone began pounding on her door so hard the frame rattled. The knocks were sharp, impatient, almost aggressive. When she opened it, her parents, Linda and Charles, stood there wearing the strangest expressions she had ever seen. Forced smiles, stiff cheeks, and a cheap grocery store cake balanced in Linda's hands. There was no warmth in their eyes. No excitement for her achievement. Just calculation. They stepped in without waiting for permission, a gust of cold air following them. Linda placed the cake on the counter like a prop, her perfume settling into the room before she even spoke. "So," she said, sliding into a seat at Olivia's kitchen table, "your salary went up quite a bit." She didn't ask how Olivia felt. She didn't congratulate her. She simply waited, lips tight, fingers tapping the table like drums. Charles stood behind her, shoulders squared, as if he had come to negotiate a contract rather than celebrate his daughter. For Olivia, the room suddenly felt smaller, heavier, as though the walls themselves knew something she had not yet realized. This was not a visit. It was a mission. Olivia kept her posture calm, even as her chest tightened. She had known her parents all her life, but something about their presence felt different, hungrier, colder. She answered quietly, choosing her words like stepping stones. "Yes, I've worked for it a long time." Charles let out a low whistle, but it wasn't admiration. It was envy. "You're doing well, Liv. Better than us." His tone sharpened. "And after everything we've done for you," he let the words trail off like bait, expecting her to grab onto guilt the way she used to when she was young. Olivia swallowed, watching the old script unfold right on cue. She had heard those lines her entire childhood. Every meal, every school uniform, every ride to practice recounted later as if she owed interest. Linda leaned forward. "We think it's fair," she said gently, the softness of her voice a disguise she had perfected, "that you contribute to the household. Just until we get back on our feet." Olivia's brows knitted. "Contribute? How?" Linda didn't flinch. 50% of your income. Monthly." The number dropped between them like a stone into water. Heavy, impossible to ignore. Olivia's pulse thundered in her ears. She wasn't angry yet. Just stunned. They were serious. Charles folded his arms, confident, as if the decision had already been made. Olivia stared at the table she'd bought herself, the dishes she washed alone, the home she built from long nights and silent sacrifices. Something in her began to harden. "That's not how this works," Olivia finally said, her voice steady but firm. Linda's smile tightened into something sharper. "Don't be dramatic. Families support each other." "Support goes both ways," Olivia replied. Charles scoffed immediately, leaning in like a man ready to win an argument he had rehearsed. "We raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head. You wouldn't be where you are without us." The words sank into Olivia like cold water, familiar, memoized, weaponized. She had heard them whenever they wanted something, money for bills, help they refused for anyone else, favors disguised as duty. But tonight, something broke loose inside her. Linda pointed a trembling finger. "You left home at 18 without warning, and now you act like you owe us no explanation." Olivia met her eyes. "I left because every breath came with a price." Linda's face twisted with annoyance. "Ungrateful," she hissed, her favorite accusation. Charles leaned forward. "This isn't optional. You will give us 50%. Starting next month." Silence filled the room like smoke. Olivia rose slowly, not in anger, but in clarity. The subtle scrape of the chair legs sounded final, deliberate. She walked to the counter and opened a drawer, hands steady, breath controlled. When she turned back, she held an envelope between two fingers, thin, sharp-edged, dangerous in its simplicity. Her parents watched it the way desperate people watch salvation. They had no idea the ground beneath them was already shifting. Linda reached for the envelope immediately, but Olivia placed her hand over hers, light, firm, unshakable. Linda paused, stunned by the boundary. "Before you open it," Olivia said, "you need to understand something." Charles rolled his eyes. "More theatrics." Olivia didn't react. She set the envelope down carefully, as if placing a truth on the table. You came here tonight for one reason. Not to celebrate. Not to support. You came to take. Linda recoiled, offended. Charles scoffed again. We are your parents. You owe us. Olivia inhaled slowly. No. I don't. They stared at her like she had spoken blasphemy. She picked up her phone and stepped aside. Dana, she said when her closest friend answered, it's time. A quiet edge sharpened Dana's tone. Stick to the plan. Let them reveal themselves. Olivia hung up and folded her arms. Linda's eyes narrowed. What plan? Olivia didn't answer. Instead, she watched them circle the envelope like scavengers. The air in the room shifted. Anticipation, tension, a storm uncoiling. Finally, Linda ripped it open. Papers slid out. Crisp, notarized, unmistakable. Not money. Not surrender. Just truth. Their truth. The truth they had forgotten they signed. Charles grabbed the first page, reading it with a frown that deepened into shock. Linda's fingers trembled as she scanned each line, color draining from her face. This isn't real, she whispered. Olivia's reply was soft but solid. It's very real. Your signatures are at the bottom. Charles shook his head violently. We didn't sign this. You did, Olivia said. 3 years ago. You insisted on putting protections in writing so I wouldn't be held liable for any of your financial decisions. Linda blinked rapidly, memory flickering behind panic. We didn't know what we were signing. Olivia stepped closer. You understood it well enough when it benefited you. Silence filled the room, thick, heavy, undeniable. Charles slammed the papers down. This doesn't mean anything. It means everything, Olivia replied. Legally and financially. Linda clutched the pages like they might transform into cash if she held them tight enough. You're being cruel, she said, voice cracking. Olivia shook her head. You demanded half my salary the night I reached something you never supported. That isn't love. That's entitlement. Charles pointed a shaking finger at her. Don't talk to your mother like that. Then stop treating me like a wallet, Olivia said. For the first time, they both went silent. Linda slammed the papers onto the table, the pages fluttering like startled birds. We'll take this to court, she snapped, her voice rising with shaky authority. If you think a few documents will stop us. Olivia didn't raise her voice. She didn't even move. You already did, she said. Her parents froze, confusion slicing through their anger. What? Charles demanded. You already filed a petition, Olivia repeated. A parental support petition. I got the notice 2 days ago. Linda's lips parted, her breath catching in her throat. Charles stiffened, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for a different version of reality. Olivia stepped closer, her expression calm, almost clinical. Before you ask, yes, I saw the fake messages you submitted. The ones claiming I promised monthly payments. She tilted her head. The number was 1 digit off mine. The room shifted, gravity thickening. Linda reached for her purse, hands frantic. We can explain. You'll get the chance, Olivia replied, in front of a judge. Charles' voice cracked as he shot to his feet. You wouldn't drag your own parents into court. Olivia held his gaze without blinking. You already dragged me there. All I'm doing now is defending myself. The door buzzer rang, 3 short chimes that sliced through the tension like a blade. Charles jumped. Linda gasped. Olivia didn't move. She simply walked to the door, her steps measured, steady, certain. Because she knew exactly what was coming next. And they didn't. When Olivia opened the door, 2 women stood on the threshold. Dana, in her camel coat, calm as a surgeon. And beside her, a uniformed officer holding a folder. Charles stumbled backward. Linda pressed her hands to her mouth, eyes wide with dread. Evening, Dana said, stepping inside with unbothered confidence. We believe we have documents for the grants. The officer moved forward, her expression professional, composed. Linda Grant? Charles Grant. Linda shook her head violently. This is unnecessary. Jessica, Olivia, tell them. The officer opened the folder. You're being served regarding the submission of falsified evidence in a civil petition and attempts to coerce financial support under false pretenses. Charles nearly buckled, gripping the back of a chair as if his legs were giving out. You can't do this, he whispered. We're family. Dana's eyes didn't soften. Family is not a shield when you break the law. Linda's voice erupted into high, panicked sobs. She trapped us. She planned this. That envelope, it was a setup. Dana stepped closer. That envelope contains a notarized declaration you both willingly signed. You can't claim ignorance now. Charles moved toward Olivia, desperation cracking through his voice. We needed that money. And I needed parents, she replied quietly. But all I ever got were debt collectors. The officer handed over the final documents. You'll receive your court date within the week. When the door closed behind them, the apartment felt different, lighter, freer. Something old had finally broken. The courtroom was cold on the morning of the hearing, too bright, too sterile, the kind of place that stripped every excuse down to its bones. Olivia sat with Dana beside her, their table neat, organized, calm. Across the aisle, her parents looked nothing like the people who stormed her apartment demanding half her life. Linda's eyes were red and swollen, her hands twisting a tissue until it nearly tore. Charles sat stiffly, staring at the floor as though losing eye contact with reality might change it. When the judge began reading the accusations, Linda immediately dissolved into loud, trembling sobs. Your Honor, she cried, we only wanted our daughter to help us. We're struggling, we've been abandoned. Dana rose smoothly, her confidence steady. Your Honor, if I may. She approached the bench with a folder full of precise documentation. The petitioners own property and receive steady retirement income. Their claim of hardship is false. She placed the fake messages on the table. These texts, supposedly from Ms. Grant, do not belong to her number. We have phone records from the carrier verifying this. The judge's expression darkened, jaw tightening. Charles muttered under his breath, this is ridiculous. Then the courtroom door opened. Slowly, carefully, Olivia's grandmother, May Grant, entered with her cane. Linda's sobs strangled into silence. Everyone turned. May walked forward with quiet authority, as if she had been waiting her whole life to speak the truth. May took the stand, her voice steady enough to slice through the courtroom air like glass. Olivia asked for nothing from these two, she said, her gaze fixed on the judge, not on her daughter. She left home at 18 and earned everything she has. They never supported her. They drained her. Olivia felt her throat tighten. It was the first time in years someone had defended her without condition. Linda gasped, betrayal twisting across her face. Mom, how could you say that? May didn't even look at her. Truth matters more than blood. The words fell heavy, undeniable. The judge leaned back, exhaling. Silence swelled large and thick. Finally, the judge spoke. Given the fraudulent evidence, the lack of proven hardship, and the corroborating testimony, this petition is dismissed. Linda collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Charles stared straight ahead, expression hollow, disbelief carving deep lines into his face. The judge continued. Additionally, the court is imposing a fine for submitting falsified materials. Charles' face drained of color. Dana placed a hand on Olivia's arm, not celebratory, but grounding, steady. A quiet victory. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight felt different, warm, new, almost tender. Olivia paused on the steps, letting it wash over her. Behind her, her parents stood frozen, smaller than she had ever seen them. Not powerful. Not demanding. Just people who had finally hit the wall of truth. And for the first time, they were speechless. The week after the hearing was strangely silent, like someone had turned down the volume on Olivia's entire life. No sudden knocks on her door. No guilt-laced messages. No threats disguised as parental concern. Just quiet. She moved into a new apartment near downtown Pittsburgh, a smaller space with tall windows and a view of the city lights that looked like scattered gold at night. She furnished it slowly, one piece at a time. A blue velvet chair from a thrift shop, a warm ember lamp, a resilient little cactus that refused to die. For the first time, every corner felt like it belonged entirely to her. 3 days after settling in, a thin beige envelope arrived with handwriting she recognized instantly, May's. Inside was one line, "You chose truth over fear. I'm proud of you." Olivia held the card against her chest, feeling a warmth she couldn't name. But peace, she knew, never stayed untouched. A week later, another envelope appeared under her door, this time in Linda's handwriting. Not an apology. Never that. Instead, a list of medical complaints, emotional appeals, and a final request for money. No mention of the court case. No accountability. Just entitlement wrapped in pity. Olivia folded the letter twice, slid it back into the envelope, and dropped it into the trash. Her hands didn't shake. Something in her had finally healed closed. 2 weeks after the hearing, Olivia received a phone call that pressed the air out of her chest. May had passed away peacefully in her sleep. For a long moment, Olivia stood by her window, the city lights flickering against the glass, her breath shallow. Grief didn't come in a violent wave. It arrived soft, quiet, like the way May had always moved through life. At the small memorial service, Olivia listened as neighbors spoke of May's kindness, her honesty, her strength. Linda and Charles attended but kept to themselves, unable to meet Olivia's eyes. When the service ended, Olivia stayed behind, running her fingers along the worn wooden pews, remembering May's steady voice in the courtroom. Days later, May's attorney called. She had left Olivia her modest home near Greensburg, a simple, cozy place filled with old books, soft curtains, and the scent of lavender that seemed permanently woven into the walls. Olivia visited once, walking slowly through the rooms, touching the furniture lightly, absorbing the quiet. But she didn't keep it. Instead, she sold the home and donated every dollar to a support group for women recovering from financial abuse. It felt like the kind of choice May would have understood. A seed of peace settled inside Olivia that day. Small, but real, something she hadn't felt in years. Life after May's passing became a calm Olivia didn't need to fight for. She spent her evenings by the riverside, letting the cool Pittsburgh wind brush against her skin, feeling the world slow down for the first time in a long while. She no longer rehearsed arguments in her head. No longer braced for guilt-filled messages. She finally lived in a space where peace didn't feel like borrowed air. One evening as she stood near the railing overlooking the river, she realized she wasn't waiting for anything. Not validation, not permission, not fear to loosen its grip. Her life was hers now. Entirely. She breathed in the quiet, closing her eyes. And that was when she decided something important. She would start telling her story, not to hurt anyone, but to remind women like her that boundaries were not betrayal. Somewhere deep inside, she knew May would approve. She walked home slowly, her footsteps echoing on the pavement, the city lights glowing like a long, warm exhale. If you're still listening, kindly hit the subscribe button. Olivia's days settled into a gentle rhythm. Mornings were quiet, just sunlight sneaking through her curtains and the soft hum of the city below. At work, she found herself more focused than ever. Her promotion had brought challenges, but unlike the struggles of her past, these challenges were hers to shape, not survive. Her colleagues noticed the shift in her. More confidence, more clarity, a woman stepping into her own life without apology. She no longer shrank herself to make others comfortable. In the evenings, she explored corners of Pittsburgh she had never seen. Quiet bookstores tucked behind coffee shops, tiny art galleries, trails that curved along the water. With each new walk, she felt another layer of heaviness fall away. When she returned home each night, she lit a warm candle on her table and opened her journal, writing pieces of her story. Not everything. Not all at once. Just the parts she was finally ready to face. And every time she paused, her mind drifted briefly to May's message, "You chose truth over fear." The sentence anchored her, reminding her that healing didn't require permission. It only required honesty. One Friday afternoon, Olivia received another letter, but this time it wasn't from Linda. It came from the court. The fine issued to her parents had been processed, along with a formal warning placed on their record regarding falsified submissions. Olivia read the document carefully, feeling neither triumph nor anger, just resolution. Actions had consequences, and this time the consequences did not fall on her shoulders. She set the letter aside and continued her evening routine, brewing tea, tidying her space, moving through her home with a sense of ownership she had earned inch by inch. As she sat down with her cup, she thought again of everything she had survived, the emotional debts, the manipulation, the narrative that she owed her parents her existence. For the first time, she felt distance from it all. Not numbness. Not bitterness. Just space. Healthy, necessary space. She whispered softly again, as if speaking to the women who might someday hear her story. If you're still listening, kindly hit the subscribe button. She imagined the lives behind the screens, the tired, the courageous, the hopeful. The thought steadied her. On a warm Sunday evening, Olivia decided to take a long walk through the downtown streets, letting her thoughts unwind slowly. She wandered past the river, past the bridges glowing in soft amber light, and she allowed herself to imagine a future untouched by guilt. When she returned home, she found a single envelope slipped beneath her door, no handwriting on the front, just a blank white surface. For a moment, her stomach tightened. But when she opened it, she found no demands, no guilt, no manipulation. Instead, it was a card from a colleague at work, a simple note congratulating her on her promotion, praising her discipline and kindness. Tears pricked her eyes unexpectedly. It struck her how unfamiliar genuine kindness felt compared to the constant weight her parents had forced her to carry. She placed the card on her table, smoothing the edges with her fingers. That night, sitting by her window, she allowed herself to finally dream without fear, without obligation, without being someone's lifeline. Her story wasn't over. But for the first time, it belonged fully to her. The days that followed felt like a gentle reset to Olivia's life. She woke earlier than usual, letting the morning sun spill through her curtains. Sometimes she brewed coffee and stood by the window, watching the city slowly stretch awake beneath her. Other times she walked to a quiet park nearby, letting the soft rustle of leaves settle her mind. One morning, while sitting on a bench with her journal, she realized something that made her chest tighten, not with fear, but with awareness. She had never really lived for herself before. Every decision, every milestone, every moment of rest had been shadowed by the fear of disappointing people who were never satisfied. Now the silence felt different. Not empty. Open. She wrote slowly in her journal, letting the truth spill onto the page. Peace doesn't come from what I earn. It comes from what I no longer carry. As she closed the journal, she felt a small but powerful shift inside her. A future no longer shaped by guilt was taking form. And the more space she created, the more she understood how deeply she'd been shaped by survival rather than living. She stood, tucked the journal under her arm, and walked home with a new kind of certainty blooming quietly in her steps. One Wednesday evening, Olivia received a phone call from an unknown number. Her first instinct was caution. Years of conditioning had taught her to brace for bad news. But when she answered, the voice on the other end was warm and respectful. It was the director of the women's support group she donated May's house proceeds to. I wanted to personally thank you, the woman said. Your contribution helped 3 women secure safe housing. Olivia sank into her couch, breath catching. I didn't expect that, she whispered. The director continued, and would love for you to visit sometime. Not as a donor, just as someone who understands. When the call ended, Olivia sat in stillness, her hand gently pressed against her heartbeat. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that her pain had created something good in the world. That evening, she walked to the river again. The water reflected the fading sky, gentle and unhurried. She watched it move and thought of the women she had unknowingly helped, women who might someday stand taller because someone believed they deserved safety. It felt like a thread connecting her to something larger, something healing. For the first time, her story wasn't just about surviving the past, it was about shaping the future. The next weekend, Olivia decided to visit a small bookstore she'd passed countless times but never entered. It was tucked between a bakery and a florist, with old wooden shelves visible through the large front window. The moment she stepped inside, the scent of paper and cedar washed over her. A woman with kind eyes greeted her, and Olivia spent nearly an hour wandering through quiet aisles, trailing her fingers along spines of novels, memoirs, poetry collections. She noticed a section labeled Rebuilding After Loss, and instinct drew her toward it. She picked up a slim book about financial autonomy and emotional boundaries, written by a woman who had also grown up in a home that demanded more than it gave. Reading the introduction felt like opening a door inside herself. When she paid for the book, the shop owner smiled softly. That one helps a lot of people. Olivia returned the smile, small, grateful. Back home, she curled up in her blue velvet chair and read page after page, feeling her own experiences reflected back at her with clarity she hadn't known she needed. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone. And that truth brought a warmth into her chest that stayed long after the final page. By late autumn, Olivia began to understand that healing wasn't a single turning point, it was a series of choices. Some days she still felt the heaviness of old memories pressing at the edges of her mind, but the difference now was that she no longer let them define her. She attended a workshop hosted by the support group she donated to, quiet, steady women sharing stories in soft, brave voices. When it was her turn, Olivia didn't share everything. She didn't need to. She simply said, I used to think boundaries made me a bad daughter. Now I understand they make me a healthy woman, Heads nodded around the room, women who understood firsthand. The director approached her afterward. "You have a strong voice," she said gently. "You could help others if you ever choose to." The idea settled into Olivia unexpectedly. She had never imagined herself as someone who could guide others. She had always been the one surviving quietly, not speaking loudly. But as she walked home through rustling leaves, she realized her story didn't need to be loud to be powerful. It just had to be honest. And hers finally was. That evening, Olivia cooked dinner slowly, letting the simple rhythm of chopping vegetables calm her thoughts. When she sat down to eat, she looked around her small apartment. The thrift chair, the soft lamp, the cactus still standing strong in its pot, and she felt something she had never truly felt before: belonging. Not the kind given by parents or demanded by guilt, but the kind built from choosing herself again and again. After dinner, she stepped onto her balcony, watching Pittsburgh glow softly under the night sky. The city felt alive, breathing with her, not against her. She whispered into the quiet sky, as if speaking to May, to herself, and to every woman who needed the reminder: strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just choosing yourself. She stayed outside until the breeze turned cool, then went inside, locking the door not out of fear, but out of peace. For the first time in her life, Olivia knew she wasn't running from her past. She was walking into her future. And the path ahead, for once, felt clear. The following week, Olivia returned to the river at dusk, a ritual that had slowly become her quiet sanctuary. She sat on the low stone wall overlooking the water, listening to the soft conversations of people walking by and the gentle slide of boats drifting lazily across the surface. The sky glowed pink and gold, reflecting off the water like a shimmering invitation. Olivia took out the slim book she had bought from the small bookstore and reread the underlined sentences. Each line reminded her that healing wasn't weakness, and distance from toxic family wasn't betrayal. It was survival. She thought about her childhood, how every smile from her parents came with a price, how every moment of joy felt borrowed. And then she thought about now. This moment. A life that finally allowed her to exhale without fear. She closed the book and rested it beside her. In the fading light, she whispered softly, "I'm allowed to choose myself." Saying it aloud made something inside her settle, like a final piece clicking into place. As the evening deepened, she pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and watched the city glow awake. She wasn't the girl who left home at 18 anymore. She wasn't the woman who feared disappointing people who never protected her. She was someone new, soft yet strong, quiet yet unbreakable. Someone she was finally proud of. A few days later, Olivia received a message from her building manager informing her that someone had left a package at the front desk addressed to her. When she picked it up, she saw no return name, just a plain brown box sealed neatly. Her stomach tightened, a flicker of old anxiety she had not felt in weeks. But when she opened it in her apartment, her breath caught. Inside was a framed photograph of her and May taken years ago, sitting in May's garden, both of them laughing at something Olivia could no longer remember. Attached to the frame was a small note from May's neighbor. "She kept this close. Thought you should have it." Tears blurred Olivia's vision, soft and warm. This was love, pure, steady, uncalculated. She placed the photo on her shelf, adjusting the angle until it caught the light just right. For a long time, she sat with her knees pulled to her chest, just staring at May's smile, the one person who had seen her without demanding anything in return. That night, Olivia lit a candle beneath the frame. The room filled with quiet warmth, with memories that didn't hurt anymore. May had given her so much more than a house or a letter. She had given her permission to live fully, without fear. And that legacy stayed glowing in the corner of the room. One Saturday morning, Olivia attended another support group meeting, this time not as an observer, but as someone ready to step forward. She listened to women speak about their families, their battles with guilt, their struggles to define their worth. When her turn came, she breathed slowly before beginning. "I used to think love meant sacrifice," she said softly. "But now I understand that real love doesn't drain you. It doesn't demand half your life to fill someone else's emptiness." The room was silent, attentive. She continued, "My parents believed I owed them everything. And for years, I believed it too. But I don't owe anyone my peace. None of us do." Several women nodded, tears in their eyes. The director smiled gently at her. When the meeting ended, a young woman approached Olivia, hands trembling slightly. "Your story, it helped me," she whispered. "I didn't know I was allowed to walk away." Olivia placed a hand over hers. "You're allowed," she said. "You always were." As she walked home afterward, Olivia felt a quiet strength expanding inside her, something solid, something true. Her story wasn't just healing her. It was healing others too. And that, she realized, was the kind of legacy she wanted to build. One rooted in truth, light, and the courage to choose oneself. That evening, Olivia returned to her apartment feeling lighter than she had in years. She changed into soft loungewear, brewed chamomile tea, and sat in her blue velvet chair, the same one she'd found in the thrift shop on a whim. As she sipped slowly, her phone buzzed with a message from Dana. "Proud of you. Really proud." Olivia smiled as she typed back her thanks. She glanced at the framed photo of May, glowing under the warm lamp, and felt the gentle ache of missing someone who had loved her without conditions. Outside, the night hummed quietly. Inside, the air felt warm and safe. She opened her journal again, writing about the workshop, the young woman's trembling voice, the way honesty had shifted something in the room. When she finished, she rested the pen on the table and leaned back, letting her eyes fall closed. For years she had lived waiting for the next blow, the next guilt trip, the next demand. Now she lived waiting for the next sunrise, the next quiet moment, the next soft reminder that she had saved herself. Happiness didn't explode into her life. It settled gently, piece by piece, like sunlight through a half-open curtain. And finally, she was ready to receive it. A few nights later, Olivia walked down to the river once more, the cool air brushing her skin as the city lights shimmered across the water. She stood there quietly, feeling the steady rhythm of the world around her. This time, she didn't think about the past. She didn't think about courtrooms or cries for money or door knocks filled with demand. She thought about the life she had built, slowly, bravely, honestly. A life that belonged entirely to her. She took a deep breath, letting it fill her chest, and whispered into the soft night breeze, "I'm free." And she was. Free from guilt. Free from manipulation. Free from carrying burdens that were never hers. As she walked home, her heart felt steady, strong, and unapologetically whole. She stepped inside her apartment, turned on her warm lamp, and smiled at her own reflection in the window, a woman who had fought quietly and won loudly. Then, thinking of the people who would one day hear her story, she spoke gently, as if addressing them directly. "Tell me where you're watching from. Hit the subscribe button and share with someone who needs it. More truth, more healing, and more powerful stories are coming."